Hey there, everybody. I thought today that I would talk a little bit about my new book release from the back of a Thirsty Camel that just dropped in March 2016. And it's been a really beautiful journey so far. I've gotten to share a lot about the book and talk a lot about the book, and that's kind of what this video is about. Specifically, I'd like to talk a little bit about the sections in the book and one section in the book in particular. So there are 6 chapters or sections in Thirsty Camel. And each of the 6 sections obviously has a theme, kind of its own theme, and then there are some overarching kind of ideas in the book, like what is ecstatic poetry, and some different explorations like that. One section in particular that I'm kind of super excited about is a section called Quantum Self. And Quantum Self really is my kind of stepping out into the world as a poet, yes, as an ecstatic poet, sure. But as somebody who is really interested in science and a scientific perspective, and as somebody who, through the lens of a poet, specifically through the lens of an ecstatic poet, has something to say about kind of the wonder and miracle of science and the scientific perspective. So I think that's kind of unique. I don't know if I've ever seen or heard of a poet doing something just like this. So before I share, I'd like to share just a few brief poems from Quantum Self, that section, with you today. But before I do, I'd like to talk a little bit about science. You know, I'm not a scientist at all, right? I'm a poet. However, I'm so moved and inspired by science. And I think on the surface that could be like a little contradictory, like maybe even paradoxical, because when we think of science, we think of generally something very reductionistic. We think of a bunch of people in lab coats in a laboratory running rats around mazes and conducting experiments. And although that's a part of science, I'm sure, I have a little bit of a different perspective. I think I feel really, really strongly, and I've learned this from various teachers and mentors in this world, some of whom I've had in my personal life, and some of whom I've just enjoyed watching, like Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson, these people who share so the scientific perspective with the world. I feel really strongly that science, as we know it today, like modern science, was actually born of wonder, this kind of base, innate human attribute that I'm calling wonder. So, many years ago, kind of at the dawn of humanity, we lived in this natural world, but we couldn't explain it. We looked up into the heavens and we couldn't explain the phenomena that we saw there, the very natural phenomena that we take for granted today, like really just the rising and the setting of the sun, of course, and the weather patterns, and the natural world and animals, and just our relationship to the earth itself. Of course, all of these things have become explained by our modern sciences like astronomy and physics. But back then, we had to know. Human beings seem to have like an innate, like a base curiosity or wonder, and so in order to kind of sate that drive, we came up with our stories, our myths, and our legends. You know, the gods and goddesses in the sky, and the animal legends and myths that are still so powerful for us. Today in our indigenous cultures and beyond. I mean, I really don't know anybody who doesn't at least resonate with an animal in some way. So some of those kind of older legend kind of stories, these archetypes, are still with us in our culture, in our modern culture, even today. In short, I would say I believe strongly that science is born of human wonder, because now we can wield this awesome power, and we can explain these things that we initially explained in our stories and legend. We know what a star is made of. We know the very famous teacher and astrophysicist Carl Sagan is so well known for saying we are literally we are made of star stuff. And I'm so inspired by that, because literally this consciousness that's speaking to you right now, and literally the ears that you're hearing with, and the eyes that you're seeing with, and the consciousness that's receiving me right now, all of it was forged in the fires of a star, some many billions and billions of years ago. So I think it's a miracle, and I think it's a miracle that we know this now, that the power of our science, or our sciences, has shown us this. So that's what the poems in this section called Quantum Self in Thirsty Camel have to say. So I'd like to share 3 poems from Quantum Self. The first one is the title poem. It's just called Quantum Self. And it goes like this. What is a thought that is more meta than meta? And when it comes, from where does it arise? Let me propose a word to you. Quantum. Quantum beyond meta-ness is a billion atomic tongues breathing heart words into your ear, so that the self beyond the self, existing 3 folds away from the one you call me, speaks. What then do we hear? The sages say that the word is Om. What I hear sounds more like everything. The world carries out its busy life in a business suit. Inside the briefcase are thoughts of separation. But when the veil is moved aside, the vastness between 2 hearts narrows, and in the far-off galaxies, entire civilizations lift their eyes to the stars. This is the spark that lights the quest for knowledge. Who wrote this poem as I was falling asleep beside you? The one who is neither you, nor I, nor even us. It is the 1,000-pointed one called we, the quantum mechanic behind the locked door. It is difficult to feel that you are part of an infinite universe from this diminutive dot in the blackness. But look at the place behind your thoughts and see that there is no distance between self and the cosmos. So that was called Quantum Self. And here's a really short one. It's called Star Stuff Meeting Star Stuff. Born of the cosmos, but returned at last to one another. Star stuff meeting star stuff, and burning as we once did, when our atoms were a sun. This is how it is when 2 hearts come together. You should know, dear one, that love lives on for far longer than it has taken the molecules within a star to become living flesh and blood. And the final poem I'd like to share from this section is actually called The Question of Consciousness. And earlier in this video I mentioned consciousness. I am so intrigued by explorations of consciousness. What is consciousness? Where does it come from? Science isn't quite sure, can't quite explain about consciousness. And so I felt like that was perfect fuel for ecstatic poetic exploration. So this is called The Question of Consciousness. And to me, as the artist here, this is kind of like the crown jewel, if you will, of this section in the book. It goes like this. Night has fallen, and the sky is cloudless. There is a knowing that we cannot explain, It compels us to raise our heads to those familiar old burning globes that dot the blackness with their taunting tongues. They beckon us closer, despite the impossibility of their desire. We become aware that we can only visit them in our imaginations. And this is when the real questions begin. What is it that imagines? Where did we come from? Why are we here? And most desperately of all, we burn to know who is doing the asking. The collective sigh of human lives breathes the words, what is consciousness? What is it that loves, that cries, that is born and dies, and looks outwards from behind these eyes to ponder poignantly at the skies? This poet asks too many questions. For the answer is spinning in wild circles in the atoms that teach my heart to beat. It is the universe that inquires when our tongues speak each question. The cosmos has infinitely sung its curiosities into the void, but needed human ears to hear its music. Night has nearly ended, and a new morning always comes. So let us say it simply now. Consciousness is just stardust that goes by my name. Perhaps this is something that we can all agree on, and let all of our questioning bring us closer to the stars. The truth of my heart is that the idea of quantum self is a miracle, and I thank you for letting me share it with you today.